All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
And welcome to today's show. This is Don Allen, and we are talking about all about relationships, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. So, very excited to get going today. Last week, shout out to Carolee Frederick for coming on our show and talking a little bit about betrayal. For those of you who didn't get to see the show, we have all of these taped. So, I'll show you a way to go back if you want to know a little bit more about previous episodes. Um, Usually, what I do after I do a TV show is that I think about what I would like to do based on the last one. I like to keep these things fairly impromptu. And today, our title for our show is Drift, drifting away from where we would like to be. Okay. And drift can take many forms and shapes, and I'll talk about those today. But we're going to really focus specifically on relationships. Okay. So if you've watched my show before, you know I really try to look at the good aspects of the relationships, what can go bad, and then what's really ugly. I mean, last week, working with betrayal, obviously, that was the ugly, but we always end our show on how to get out of a mess or how to get our relationship back to having that solid, loving relationship that we had when we started and we wanted to keep. So we're going to do that. We're going to look at that today. And today, like I said, we're going to talk about drift. Now, one of the things that I always like to say on my show, at least this is how I conceptualized my show when I first started, is what I talk about needs to be really true about 2,000 years ago, maybe longer, and it'll probably be true 2,000 years from today. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to get into politics or those types of things. I don't want to get into fads, something that's going on that's the newest thing or the latest thing. Just things that we can count on and we could count on 200 years ago, what's been going on in life. So you'll notice from time to time, I will bring people on the show or I will reference things that really show you that, yes, this is something that's just always been true. We sometimes think of things like record classics. You listen to a song and you go, boy, that's a classic. What a classic is it's just as relevant today as it was when you wrote it or you heard it for the first time, and it'll probably endure the test of time. It's not going to be a fad song or something like that. So we want to look at that to give you hope, because the reality of it is, and I say this at the end of my show, it's not a fair fight. It is not a fair fight, folks. We all who want loving and lasting relationships need to join together, and we need to pull in the same direction. So even though I'm on the air today, this is really about all of us. And that's why I really welcome your contact and your connection. So please, when I put up the banner that says how you can reach me, I really look forward to not only those types of questions and connections, but it helps me reflect so I can give you all more of what you're looking for in these relationships. The other thing is you can always go back to look at past episodes, because from that, you'll be able to learn how to use these fundamental ways of thinking and being to improve your relationship. Today, we're going to talk about drift, but we're also going to talk about getting out of drift and getting back to where we want. So I always like to put a couple questions on that's just I'm thinking that's relevant to you all. So here's my questions, and let me read them off. When was the last time you and your partner had a real conversation that wasn't about schedules, wasn't about chores, wasn't about bills or kids? When's the last time you did that? Do you ever look at your partner and wonder, when did we stop laughing and going out together, right? Like we always used to when we were dating and couldn't wait for that date. Um, If nothing has changed in your relationship for the next 5 years, hypothetically, if nothing changes, would you feel closer or further apart from your partner? Um, and you ever get to the point where, you think just like having sex is just checking off one more thing that you have to do for the end of the week, when at the beginning you couldn't wait to get together and really show each other how much you loved each other, not only with bids for connection, but also maybe in the bedroom. Okay. So the question always becomes, how do we drift into that? All right. So I like to start off the show with the good. And part of what I want to do is talk about the beginning. Now this isn't drift, but I want to set the stage. So what I mean by that is, when did we drift from that early excitement? Well, first, let's look at what the early excitement is. Okay, not to take out all the fun of it, because I really think it's great to have romance and kismet and it was meant to be and soulmates and stuff like that. Even though Sue Johnson would yell at me, but what would that look like? Okay, well, what happens is, when your body starts to sense it's compatible with another person and it's mutual. And it really is pretty cool. It's really neat. I mean, it's really working. Okay. What happens is, your body starts putting chemicals in your body really designed to put more of you on the planet. Okay. Because that's the mating process. Well, you have a whole section of your brain that's designed to get you on the planet with kids. And it doesn't always care whether there's social convention or other things, right? And sometimes people put alcohol on top of that, and, sometimes things happen. But let's look at that. One of the things I put down here is a fun fact. Okay. And this is the fun fact. This is from anthropology. And that is, a lot of why you're first attracted to somebody is because of your pheromones. You breathe each other's scent in. Now, we aren't like bloodhounds that really, really just rely on their nose to get around. We don't really rely on our nose as much as, say, our eyes or our ears. But the reality of it is that when you breathe in somebody, what your body begins to realize is how dissimilar your pheromones are. Now, there's studies that prove this, right? So what that means is, when you notice and they notice that your pheromones are really dissimilar, you're attracted to each other, right? The French have this statement, a certain je ne sais quoi. I don't know why. Well, part of the I don't know why is you're breathing each other in. Isn't that fun? I mean, I just think that's so wild in terms of just how we get together. Okay. But the other thing too is that when we begin to really, really dig each other, and I don't know who came up with this word. I probably should look it up, whether it's Latin or Greek or something. But the word's limerence. I mean, I don't know. It sounds like limerick, but it's not. Limerence. And what limerence is that, gee, it's great to be alive feeling when you're dating. Really, to go back in time, the Carpenters had a song called "On Top of the World." And oh, let's see, Katrina had one, "Walking on Sunshine." So go back into your go back into your phone and listen to those songs. Those songs are homages to limerence. Listen to how that goes. The one line is, "Got the sun in my eyes, and I won't be surprised if it's a dream." That sounds like limerence to me. But what's going on when we have limerence? Okay, so I wrote a little thing out here. I'm going to read you because it's just easier. But you have chemicals in your body, right? And I'm just going to talk to you about these chemicals that are flying around your brain. Now, I don't like to get too much like I'm sounding like a professor, but this is just fun. So stay with me on it. So, what happens is, when you feel really good because you're with that partner, what happens is your body gives you dopamine hits. Now, a lot of this is in the news nowadays, so a lot of you have probably heard that. But what the dopamine does is, it throws a little party in your brain and it says, "Let's do that again. That was amazing." And then another chemical in your brain runs around called glutamate. And the glutamate's a note taker. And what the note taker writes down is, "Hey, you like that? I'll make notes of it and I'll remember it." Okay. And then you have another part of your brain called the hippocampus, not that you have to worry about it. That's your filing clerk. So now you've got, "It feels good. I'll remember that. Let me store it in the filing cabinet." And then I got a really fancy big word for you, the nucleus accumbens. Okay, a Cuban, something like that. That's your GPS. Now, the only thing that thing does, nucleus accumbens, is it says, I can figure out how to get that for you again. And it doesn't really think in context. Like, okay, I'll give you an example with that part of your brain. And that is, let's say you wanted to get a drink of water and you say, oh, I'll just go to the sink. That was that part of your brain. So now you say, well, can't get water there. Oh, well then, go to the back faucet in the back room. Okay, well, hey, you can get it in your shower or the bathtub. You could keep going, but one of the things, if you were really hard up for water, that part of your brain might says is, hey, there's water in the toilet, right? Now you'd never want to do that, but that part of your brain doesn't care whether you want to do it or not. It just tells you where to get it. Okay. Now this is really, really important because when this thing flies around and it does this in your brain, and it's happened to you literally thousands of times today, probably already, what happens is it all goes to your thinking brain. Your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex brain, your ventral vagal brain, whatever you want to call it, that part of your brain is in charge of taking all of that information from the dopamine hits and all of that and says whether you should do it or not, right? That part of your brain is in control of what should we do, right? So you might have a ton of limerence for somebody, but you don't think it's a good idea to go out with them. That part of your brain might say, hey, I really like that person, but this isn't a good idea. So that part of your brain is always that executive functioning. It's the one that should be making decisions. Okay. So let me give you one for that, because some people, kind of wonder about what I'm about to say. To the ugly, what happens is you've already, and I'm gathering when I put my notes down, you probably already figured this out. What about addiction? What happens with addiction? Well, that process that I just told you spins around on addiction. But when it gets to the thinking brain, the body is so built up to wanting the drug, wanting that dopamine hit, it overrides your thinking brain. And now you're out of control. What happens is that the survival brain is looking to get that because it wants it, it needs it, and it doesn't have to listen to your thinking brain. Now, one of the things about the ugly, because you'll notice from my show, whenever I give you something like that, I always try to give you hope. One of the things that we have definite things in mental health to help not only with addiction, but we also have specialty and specialized interventions to help people as a couple not only get out of the addiction and go to sobriety, and again, have that thinking brain regain control of your brain, but it also helps you do it in a way that you get closer to your partner and that you move forward in a loving and lasting relationship. So I think I will try to get somebody on the air that really, really explains it. But I know in my office, if I have people that come in that have addiction problems, I have a skill set to help that. And the Gottman Institute in particular really has a very good program that they've designed to help couples not only understand it, but to get out of it. And then again, to restore that thinking brain so it's in charge and not the addiction. Okay. So, one of the things that we want to do is we want to understand that these dopamine things are happening and they make us feel good, but ultimately we need to think through what's best for us. But in a case of people being in a relationship and having lightning in a bottle and falling in love and getting married or living together and just can't wait to get home to each other, that continues to move round and round in a good way, right? But here's a spoiler alert that you already know: limerence fades. All of those chemicals that are happening in your body fades, because part of what's making that whole spin go around with dopamine and glutamate and everything, part of what's happening is you're making a lot of chemicals. Oxytocin, which is a love chemical, that's just flooding your body during limerence, right? And part of what will happen with that is that you start to combine that with other ones. I'm not going to get into all the fancy words, but you have another one that really creates that spark, that, boy, I want to do this. Wow. And it works together with the dopamine. So there's all these chemicals that are happening, but eventually it starts to fade. Well, why does it fade? Well, part of what happens is something called habituation. We start to kind of go round and round, and the things that are so exciting, we habituate to, or we become, kind of know this already, know this now. And, what a lot of people talk about is they talk about this idea of, wow, the limerence is really the fire in the relationship, and now it's gone out. I really disagree with that, folks. And I can tell you from 40 years of experience in my own life, what happens with relationships is that begins to get replaced with things like shared meaning and loving connections, right? And those loving connections can create oxytocin and all these other things. But, when you talk to somebody who's have a loving, lasting relationship for 50 years, they might talk about how great it was at the beginning, but a lot of what you're going to hear from them is, oh man, these last 50 years have been one heck of a great ride. So you start to replace that with these cherished memories and connections. But you have to continue to build it. It's not something that just happens. And I'm going to talk to you about that because if you don't, that's the topic of today, which is drift. Okay. So I'm looking at my clock right now and it looks at that we are right about time for a commercial. So let's go to that. I'll talk a little bit more about drift and then we'll get into the mailbag afterwards. Stay tuned.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And we're back. All right. So we kind of know a little bit about limerence. We know limerence fades. We know, things kind of get into a routine for people, right? The one thing I like to talk about, if you don't really know that yet, watch your parents. You notice when your parents and you were watching a TV show together, right? Might have been watching Friends or Murder She Wrote, or way back when you might have been watching, I don't know, the Gunsmoke. I don't know. But you notice your parents weren't sitting on each other's lap making out the whole show. That's because limerence fades and you get into just kind of the routine, a lot like what you saw in your family growing up. And that usually happens for virtually everybody as you get on with the relationship. So let's talk about our main topic today, which is drift. So one thing I always like to do when I do drift is to kind of put some kind of a definition for that, right? And one thing I put down here is in relationships, drift is slow. It's not usually dramatic. A lot of times it's almost unnoticed, from feeling deeply connected to getting distance or getting back into our own worlds and not having that connection. It's usually not about even big fights. And you'll notice the theme with what I talk about with the Gottman Institute. It's about small moments of disconnection that pile up, right, when we stop being intentional with one another. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Now, again, I'm going to give you some of what I think is important, but I'm going to talk also about the Relationship House in Gottman. One of the reasons I do that is because I think it's the best science we have out there. And what we want to do is we want to do things that are known and testable from science. Let's kind of look at that. Okay. All right. So what happens is there's a reduction in knowing what's important in our partner's world. There's a reduction in our fondness and admiration because we're turning towards things that aren't in our relationship. A lot of times that can cause us to have a reduction in the bids for one another. Hi, honey, I'm home. Hey, I'm upstairs. Instead, we just go right to our video games and start playing video, and we don't really talk to our partner because we're so into the video games. That's where we're getting our dopamine hits. Okay. So in other words, we stop knowing kind of what's important to our partner, how to make their dreams come true. And then we also stop noticing what's important in terms of shared meaning. That's important because shared meaning is how we roll as a couple. Okay. So we're gonna try to look at that in a way that that we can use our mailbag. So let me kind of start with that. The third section is going to be on how to fix it. So look at some of the questions we've got today. I think you'll really like them. Okay. We used to talk about everything. Now we mostly talk about the kids and bills. How do we get back to the way we were? Right. Well, one of the ways we do it is we talk about it. Right. Now you're going to hear me say this throughout today, but in general, say what you want. Don't say what you don't want. Say what you need. Don't say what you don't need. That's my thing that I talked about earlier when I mentioned, do you want to eat out today? Yes. Well, would you like Chinese food? No. How about tacos? No. Well, how about a salad? No. So you're not saying what you do need, you're saying what you don't need. So one of the things you might say is, I really don't want Chinese food because I ate that yesterday, but I'd really go for tacos. And then when you both agree on what you'd really rather go for, then you make it happen. See, that's the way we take what we call opportunity in relationships to make something happen. Okay. So what happens is we really get busy with our day-to-day stuff, right? And then we start to check off boxes of what we need to do. But a lot of times we don't make priority for the relationship because we kind of feel like it's there. We kind of feel like it's for granted. So in other words, we don't go out on a date night because we're going to go to the soccer game for our kids, which is really good. But that doesn't mean that we constantly make everything else a priority except our relationship. Okay. So what happens is that when we get grown and the kids are empty nesters, if we haven't really made those bids down the road, what do we do? How do we do that? So what's happened is my word. What happens is we have drifted away from all of that wonderful stuff when we've had that limerence to kind of having the child part of the relationship or the executive branch of the relationship begin to overrule and we become different persons. One of the things I mentioned before that I really like is when I was a younger person, I used to like listening on the radio to a 5-minute segment when I was going to work. And it was Dr. James Dobson, Focus on the Family. I don't know whether any of you remembered it. Certainly people my age might. But one of the things that he said is, picture you going down the river with your partner in different canoes. Every so often you have to make a paddle, small things often, a paddle to make the canoes go together. And if you don't do that, you might find yourself drifting to the opposite end of the river on each side. We can't have that. But that's how it happens. That's what drift is. Drift is when we don't make those little things often happening in relationships to make sure those little dopamine hits happen for our relationship. Now, remember, one of the things that you really want to do with a relationship is you want to make sure your partner always knows continually that not only do you think they're neat and awesome and wonderful, right? But you thank your lucky stars that you've got them. And you want to show that. You want to show that with a kiss on the neck, a big hug, a little card, a little note, anything that you can do during the day, texting, hey, just thinking about you. You're the most important person to me today. Anything that you're doing that can really help. I had a couple weeks ago, the head of the National Marriage Seminar, Chris Canvas. And one of the things that he did for us, so go back and watch that show. One of the things he did for us is to say, look, you can join my program, Couple Strong, right? And he usually has a fee for it. For our audience, he even waived that. So you go back and look at that and you can learn how to sign up for it. But every day, ever since I did that show at 11 o'clock in the morning, my time, I get something from the National Marriage Seminar giving me a suggestion on what I can do for my relationship today. That's the big thing on my show. What did I do for my relationship? So what we're trying to do with that is we're really trying to have it so that every day those small things often can happen. All right. What I'm doing is looking for my questions again. So how do we get back to where we were? Small things often and little connections. Okay. And then also those little affection things, give kisses, give hugs, give appreciations. Okay. Same kind of question on my next one. My partner and I are still in love, but it feels like we're roommates. Is this just what happens after 20 years? Now, the reason I picked this one from the mailbag is because one of the things that I would add to the first question is that you're going to go through changes in your life, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. You're going to go through changes. Your bodies are going to go through changes. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have layoffs. You're going to have scary times. And what you always want to do is make sure that you and your partner fight whatever it is together. Very, very important. So one of the things that happens is it requires a conversation. So if you've been together for 20 years and you're feeling it's kind of flat, then what you want to do is you want to talk about not only, hey, I'm noticing that, be careful with the four horsemen, don't criticize, but hey, I'm noticing that. You think we should have a talk maybe about how to make it so we're connected more and we're doing more fun things together? It's really funny, when we're talking about going on a date night, that people kind of go, oh, well, I guess we could. That's the things we should really be, putting as a priority in our life. We've worked really hard all week. We've made money, right? So let's go out and take a little bit of that and go have fun, whether it's a movie or a dinner date or whatever, and get somebody to watch the kids. In the beginning, you always want to think it was us as a couple. Now, sometimes people talk to me as well. No, that's not true. We have a blended family. We have yours, mine, and ours. So we never really had a time that was us as a couple. With those kind of relationships, you want to make sure that you have little retreats so that you do form it as if you two started out together, because you're going to need to go out to all of the relationships and you're going to have to function as a couple, right? Okay. Let's see, another question. Let's see, check my time. After my husband retired, we're together more, but somehow I feel apart. Okay, sometimes I feel apart. Now, this gets back to building on the last thing I said. That one's been 20 years, right? But now it's a different time of life and you're changing roles. When you were a little kid as a pre-4, you weren't in school. All of a sudden you were in kindergarten and first grade. Your life really shifted to a new time. Then you graduated from high school. Well, that's a new time. Well, guess what? Retirement is no different. Now you don't have to wear your hat in terms of being a professional anymore or doing whatever it is that you were doing. So let's say you were a plumber and now you don't have to do that. What are you going to do instead? So that requires a conversation in yourself, but it also requires a conversation in your relationship. So you got to start talking about how are we going to have new normals? How are we going to have routines? How are we going to make bids for each other? Things that really may have really kept us together when we were younger may not be on the front burner like they are today. A lot of times if you're married or you're in your 20s or 30s, kind of looking and planning your schedule around maybe sex was something that was really something you looked forward to. People might say, well, wait a minute, now that I'm 70 and I'm retired, what is that to me? Well, for a lot of people when they're in their 70s, that's still super important. But the way that you express your sexual relationship might be very different. There might be a lot more foreplay in terms of just talking and caressing and hugging and those types of things, right? So it requires a conversation. But remember, a lot of where that relationship is the best is when you do have all of those things that happen outside of the bedroom, that you're really loving each other and you're really hugging each other and you're laughing when you make dinner together and you're asking how that food was and how much you appreciate somebody making that food for you. That's where a lot of what happens in the bedroom works so well. So this requires more of a conversation. The other thing too is just what are you into? Some people are volunteering, some people are visiting family, some people are traveling. Whatever it is you like to do, you need to make those small things often and those small bids for one another. Okay. So let's see. We've got about 30 more seconds with those mailbag. What we're going to do is come back and really talk more about how to fight drift. And then our last section, I may take a little more time with regard to how we need to talk to our partner about drift. So we'll see you shortly and we'll be ready for our third segment. Come on back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
All right, so if you noticed a little bit from the mailbag, I was talking about how to move away from drift or how to see that as the culprit, and let's work together to solve that. Now, if you notice, a lot of times when I'm talking about relationships, it's you and your partner against the problem. The minute it becomes you and your partner against you and your partner, then I have to give you some other ideas about how to get out of that, right? One of the things we're learning today is a theme: say what you want. Don't say what you don't want. Say what you need. Don't say what you don't need. Don't criticize your partner. Don't have contempt for your partner. And don't get defensive. And then if all of that stuff really starts happening, don't ignore your partner, because that's when those bids start going down, and that'll cause drift a lot faster too. One thing I can do is talk about drift in terms of when we kind of chew up our relationship through some of those bad habits. Not going to talk about that today, though. I want to talk about kind of how we drift more than, how four horsemen can cause drift. So I want to do two things. I want to talk about the Gottman stuff, because I think, again, that's a lot of your salvation from a science perspective. But let me talk a little bit about kind of where I really oriented myself to drift. When I did my dissertation was to use intensive home-based family preservation, using family to help juvenile delinquents stop committing crime and get back into the mainstream where they can be productive in our society. And I had a juvenile court that really called me up and said, "Hey, Don, can you help us with this? Can you create a program?" Which I did. Later, that program became my dissertation. But one of the things I looked at was not just these kids getting into trouble. I looked at the best and the brightest. And what I mean by that is, what do really good kids do, and how do they succeed? And what are they doing in a good way, and how are they avoiding in a bad way? And one of the things that really just came up in the research all over the place was this idea of how juvenile delinquent kind of behavior, good kids drift into it they drift into it. So this is where I really became very fascinated with this idea. And then high functioning people don't drift. So one thing I want to talk about with that is that think of the concept for you. All right. And I'm going to just go to a couple things, but let's go back to junior high or middle school, as they call it, and high school. Let's look at those. One of the things that I bet you your teachers and maybe your parents encouraged you to do was pick something fun for you, right? And a lot of kids, it's, hey, I really like baseball. I really like football. I really like tennis. I really like running. Or maybe it's like, I'm not real keen on all of that. I mean, I do it, but what I'd really like to do is I'd like to stay at home and play my violin, or I'd like to get in the band and I want to play tuba, or I want to play trombone, or I want to play my clarinet, something, but something that you kind of had a real draw to do. You had a lot of fondness and admiration for that thing. So what happens with that is you have people that care about you and professional people that might be coaches or trainers, and they show you how to do it right. But with that, they also do something else, is they give you discipline. So I remember in the sports that I did, you had to condition, and the coach would make you run sprints or run laps or do jumping jacks or leg lifts. Those were hard, and just do a lot of those kind of things that your body says stop doing that. You're not getting dopamine hits for that. It hurts and you don't like it. And you wake up in the morning and you can't move because you got so much lactic acid in your muscles that you don't even want to move. But you go back and you do it again the next day and the next day. And all of a sudden you get into shape, or you start being able to play your instrument really good. Or maybe you're in the marching band and not only can you play it good, but you can walk at the same time and march and do all these things. But what you're learning is a discipline. Discipline to me is a fancy way of saying no to yourself, but also accepting influence. No, I'm not going to stop. My coach tells me to do it. So that means I'm not going to get hurt. I just need to make myself do it. So what happens is you get in good shape. You get to be competent in what you do. And that's really great. But then, you kind of get out of your sport, or you kind of put your instrument down, or maybe you're in great shape. And part of why you're in great shape is because you're younger, right? Well, in those kind of situations, when we stop getting away from our discipline and we stop accepting influence even from ourselves, right? I can watch TV and I can sit there and eat something, or I can go exercise for an hour today. I think I'll go eat something. So what happens is we begin to drift out of being in shape and we begin to drift more maybe into gaining weight. Okay. So that's what drift looks like. My favorite example of that is thinking of a garden. If you make a garden, you need to plant the right vegetables and fruit. You need to make sure weeds don't happen. You need to keep the bugs away. You need to keep the rabbits away. You need to know when to plant it. All of that's a discipline and it's a knowledge. And a lot of times, what do you do when you're doing that? You ask somebody who has a green thumb, how do you grow such good tomatoes? Let me show you. Right. So all of a sudden you have a discipline about that. But if you just plant a garden and you just let it go, you're going to see it lets itself go. You're going to have weeds. It's going to override it. And you might get fruit and vegetables, but you may not want to eat them, or you might not have very many, or you might not get very much yield from that because it drifted into just going natural. So that's what drift looks like. Now, in a relationship, what drift looks like is that you just don't make those bids for connection. So let's go to Gottman. Okay, let's go to the relationship house. The first part is love maps, knowing what your partner really likes in their world and knowing about them, what their favorite color is, what their favorite food is, what their favorite restaurant is. And when you make bids for them, you also make bids in a way to let them know that you know what they are and you want to do them with them, right? That builds that fondness and admiration, which is a lot of those dopamine hits, right? And with that comes the joy of your partner being happy with you and your partner being back to you. They like you and they want to be with you, but it goes back and forth again. So now you're getting some of those positive dopamine hits, maybe not in terms of limerence, but maybe a more sustained and loving and deepening relationship, meaning that, boy, I really like my person. And now I have all these memories with them. and all of these little snippets of time where life was so joyous that time just stopped, and I'll always remember it. Sometimes what we do is we mark those moments with little things like jewelry, little things like, I don't know, trophies or special things. We do that a lot of times at the holidays, like a Christmas or a Hanukkah. But, also sometimes it's just a day of special meaning or maybe one of our traditions, okay, an informal traditions. You ever see those people that celebrate monthly anniversaries or something about a special day they had that they always go back to and celebrate? That's the story of us, and that's the story of, hey, I celebrate it because you're important to me. So that's kind of what I mean by this. We have to have a discipline about weeding the marriage garden. So a couple of things Gottman talks about is make sure you have and you try to get those successful bids 86% of the time. The hi honey, I'm home. Hey, I'm over here. And really stop what you're doing, come over, look at them in the eye and say, hey, I want to talk to you. How are you? Those positive bids for connection, very, very important. One of the ways we weed the garden every day is even if we have conflict, we always have 5 minutes of I like you to every 1 minute of I'm not happy with you. Very important that you never fall below that, because then your bids for connections are starting to fall. So we need to kind of know that that's a good discipline to prevent drift. Okay. So that's one of the things that we can really do with that. The other thing we can do is check in with each other every day to say, how was your day? And not to fix it, but to really listen to how their day was and be supportive of them and care about them and take their side and take their part and ask what's important in their day, right? Once a week, we need to make sure we sit down and talk about how our week went. So one of the ways we weed the garden is we start with 5 positive things we liked about the week and 5 positive things we really like about our partner. Because we might be disappointed. Maybe they forgot to do something, or maybe they didn't do something they said they would do, and it really messed you up for the day. You can think about that and really get mad and distant and drift, or you can say, yeah, they did that wrong, but I think I'll think of about 10 things they did for me this week that, boy, nobody else on the planet cares enough about me to really want to do all those things, right? Little bitty things that happen, right? Maybe when you went to your car, you didn't have time to make your lunch, so you had a lunch waiting for you. Who does that? Who pesters you to make sure you go get your physical? Who pesters you to really care about what's going on in your life? Or let's say you are trying to lose a little weight because you've drifted out of that discipline, and somebody really comes up to you and say, how are you doing with that? I know that's important to you. How many people in the world really do that for us nowadays? So I choose to think about those things more than I do about everything that went wrong. Okay. So that's some of the things we really want to look at and do, is to make sure that we do that, but we do that regularly. Let's take our last break, and then we're going to go to the next segment, which is what are we going to do for fun this week with our partner? Love that. It's one of my favorite parts of the show. I put one down for you today that's pretty good. That's going to take me a little longer to explain. So come back. We're all going to do that together. And then I hope you'll get back with me on my emails or whatever to tell me what you think and what you'd like me to talk about. Let's take a break.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom. purpose, passion, power, and peace, all quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
One of the things that amazes me about the show is how fast it goes. I can't believe we're already on the fourth segment. This is a segment, for those of you who have been watching me, and for those of you who don't, is when I say, let's all go do something fun for the week. Okay, so we're all going to try to do this. So just not you, it's all of us, including me. So what I want to do is, not go to talk to your partner about, are we drifting? One of the things I want to do is I want you to pick a time with your partner and I want you to tell them something you particularly like about them, okay? Something unique to them that lets them know that you very genuinely think they're awesome, interesting, sexy, something that, hey, you're unique to me in the world and I can't replace you. You're the only one. And boy, is that exciting to me. Okay? Don't make it generic. Next, I want you to pick an activity or an opportunity that you two can do something that would allow you to make all those positive bids I just talked about, right? When people are really connecting from research, we know they're doing positives 20 minutes of the time to only 1 minute of the negative. So I want you to really get to where you're grooving in that way. Maybe it's something you used to do and really liked, or something that might be out of the ordinary, but fun, but just you two. I don't want us all go to the park with the kids on this one. I want you guys, just you guys. Okay. So you may have found a new restaurant that both of you have wanted to explore. Maybe you want to play a board game, or maybe you're into video games and you want to play one, or maybe you used to play one that's really old and you want to kind of look at that. This is, like I said, is it true 2,000 years from now? I try not to give examples, but I'll give you one. My wife and I really enjoyed the last Mission Impossible movie. So we watched the one before because it was the sequel. And we liked it so much, now we're watching all the old ones. And part of the fun from that is just watching what was state-of-the-art technology in 1996. Boy, a lot's changed. But we did it together. So whatever it is for you all, think about it and get into it and then talk. Remember, what I want, not what I don't want. And then if they don't want to, they have to give you one that you might do. And when you both agree to it, that's a couple thing, then you're in. Okay. What I need you to do, though, is whatever you decide to do, that you do it in a way that you're both highly engaged with one another, that 20 minutes to one, that you really remind yourself of, back in those days that you really did good. Okay. So then after you do that and it worked, you might make a plan to do another one. Maybe not the same, different, but the same spirit. But then what I want you to do is I want you to say something to them like, wow, this was really fun, if you mean it, right? And we ought to do more stuff like this all the time. I vote we start trying to come up with ways that we could really do that again. So that's what I want you to say. Okay. Now remember, I keep saying this, what I do want, not what I don't want. What I do feel, not what I don't feel. And then really celebrate them again. What you probably will notice is it'll start coming back to you. Now, if it doesn't come back right away, don't get discouraged. It probably just means that you guys have drifted out of this rhythm where you're connecting with each other. That happens to people. Just keep doing it as if it's going to work. All right. So finally, after you do enough of those, that's when it might be a really good opportunity to sit down and say, wow, we kind of drifted off of connecting like this, didn't we? What was that like for you when we weren't connecting? Now that we're connecting more again, what was that like for you? Well, you know what? I think you and I ought to make sure that that's our enemy. We need to make sure that we're doing things that we celebrate each other and we do things regularly. Okay. Remember, one of the biggest things that the Gottman Institute talks about is small things often, little things. This is how I describe it. If you're going down the bike trail with your partner and you're on a bike trail, you have to make constant little movements so that you don't run into each other and wreck, or you don't fall off the bike trail, or you don't hit a branch, or you don't go through a puddle. You constantly are making these little adjustments with your bike so that, again, you can stay balanced, but you can stay balanced with your partner. So I think couple stuff, long lasting relationships together or ideal marriages do just that. As they go down the bike trail of life, so to speak, they do that in a way that they keep their balance, but they also make sure that they're riding their bike so that their partner's with them. You don't go and ride 5 miles ahead of them or 5 miles behind them. You want to ride the bike next to them because that's why you're going down the bike ride. That's why we have couples relationships. So that's kind of what I want to do. I want to have you guys first start with building some connection and then maybe have a talk about it. Remember, safety first. Okay, very important, safety first. The other thing I want to say is that back to what I said at the beginning, we are all doing this together. We are all in a tug of war where we're pulling in the same direction. Because believe me, and if you don't, just watch regular television, right? What you're going to notice is there's a lot of programming out there that's kind of divisive for relationships. I don't know that they're intending it to be or not. I don't think that far ahead. But I do know that this is one show that is definitely going to say how to have long-lasting, loving relationships together. Whether it's a relationship or a marriage or whatever it is, or whatever you define it as, that you guys have loving, connecting coupleness, because we are designed to be together. So, all right, I think that's all for the day. Go out and do that. Let me know how it's going, and we'll see you next Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. It's been great spending an hour with you. I look forward to next week. Take care.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.